You moved to Baltimore. You're in like the most traditional of businesses, banking. You built one of the hottest startups out there. But in your new city, you notice that there are a lot of homeless people. And in your free time, you decide to dress up like a homeless person and walk the streets of Baltimore looking for people to help.
I was in a new city. I had left college. Nobody knew who I was. I had a chance to make an identity. And so one of the great benefits is I didn't have to unmake an identity.
You're a banker by day and you're hanging out in homeless communities at night.
Yes. I'm so scared to walk there. I keep all of my clothes in filing cabinets at the bank. I park my car at a light rail stop like 30 minutes away because I don't want to park it in the neighborhood. When I walk in the neighborhood, I'm wearing all these tattered clothes and I'm walking with a limp to look worthwhile. Like, that's how scared I am of this place. What I saw that was so concerning was I saw this society essentially reflecting back to the people who are experiencing homelessness as a communication that they are not worth it, valuable.
They're invisible. I just think it's such an amazing story. You've created literally a new lane in banking. Why don't you spend a minute before we let you go talking about how it went down when you got your first customer.
One of the people I was talking to raise money had suggested that I meet with his investment banker friend down in Northern Virginia to essentially explain to him my idea. And I said to him, like, well, good news. It is ready today. I can do this deal. And so he shakes my hand and he walks out of the conference room and I don't leave. And then he comes back, he's like, what are you doing? Like, isn't the meeting over? What's wrong? And
so you just sat there.
I just sat there and getting the nerve up to tell him that I wasn't leaving until we had a signed contract.
Welcome to the Laura Neuman Show. Today my guest is Matt Bjonerud. I wanted to interview Matt because I just think his entrepreneurial story is amazing. He built one of the hottest fintech startups out there. In fact, in preparation for building that company, he bought a year's supply of chunky soup because he didn't know how he was going to get the company funded. Now it's a home run. Before he started as an entrepreneur, he actually had a very successful career in banking that prepared him for this opportunity. What I didn't know is that there's another side to the story. In the evenings, while he was working in a conservative bank during the day, at nighttime he was dressing as a homeless person because he really wanted to make a difference in the world. And wait till you hear the details around that and what came out of it ultimately. It's going to be an interesting conversation, but first, we're going to go back to the beginning. So your family moves back when you're like 10 or 11 from Europe. You land in this community in a suburb of Maryland, and they enroll you in public school.
Enroll in public schools are very good in Montgomery County, and so why wouldn't you do that? And we go to the public school, and we're learning about American history.
And you hadn't learned that in Europe? Definitely
had not. No
discussion.
In a Commonwealth school, they do not focus on American history as much, right? Like, it is not. It is a European-centric schooling, a British-centric schooling, and we go to the public school, and we're learning about American history.
And you hadn't learned that in Europe? Definitely
had not, no.
No discussion.
In a Commonwealth school, they do not focus on American history as much, right? Like, it is not. It is a European-centric schooling, a British-centric schooling, right? And so American history isn't given as much attention. And so when I came back to the U.S., we were learning about American history, and that's, of course, where slavery comes up and racism. And I am stunned because in my British Commonwealth school in Switzerland, every student was from a different country, different culture, different everything. And so, and there was no two people from the same country. And so I couldn't even fathom.
So in the whole school, there weren't two people from the same, were there two?
I would say there were, like, in my class of 20 something, there were two of us from America. And then everyone else was, for the most part, from a different country.
That's a great experience. I mean, maybe at the time it might have felt difficult, but I think that's extraordinary looking back.
I was so young, I didn't even notice. It was just like, oh, this is just how the world is. And when I came back to the U.S., that's when it was a stark contrast where all the kids not only looked the same, they had all grown up a few blocks away. They had all gone to school together from kindergarten up through, at that time it was the 4th or 5th grade. And They all knew each other really well. And so when we come in and we're learning about slavery, I am initially very confused because I was confused about a lot of things coming back to America, but I was confused about that because I couldn't understand how you could convince some grouping of people. And I'm thinking back to my British Commonwealth school where I'm like, how could I have convinced even some of the people in the class to gang up on the others? There would be no reason to do that. There's not enough common bonds to do that because everyone was, again, from a different country, different culture. I just couldn't imagine it. And and then when I was there, it started to dawn on me that I was the person that was being ganged up on, even though we all looked alike, and even though we were all technically from the U.S.
But you had enough. You were different because you had this different experience. You probably dressed differently.
I
listened to different music.
I didn't own jeans. I didn't listen to the music they listened to, and I remember like specifically there was one very horrifying moment where they were passing around worksheets to do a icebreaker event when I came into the class, and it was you had to write down a number of questions about yourself, and one of the key areas was what are your top 3 favorite bands, what's your favorite song, and on and on, and like also like maybe with TV shows. And we didn't really watch TV. I had never listened to American music. Like we just didn't.
What, was there a television in your home?
There was a television in our home. We just weren't really supposed to watch it.
You weren't a family who watched television.
We weren't a family that watched television, and there were of course movies, but not really television. We were not really supposed to sit in front of the TV and watch television, except for maybe like Mr. Rogers. And
so your parents are like providing this amazing upbringing for you, but as a kid in that environment, I mean, that it's not fun to be different.
Yeah, I mean, well, look, I couldn't name a single band. I couldn't name a single song. I I didn't understand like how the songs were 3 minutes and not 20 minutes. That was news to me. I didn't understand if someone had a band name, why wouldn't that band name show up in the lyrics and in the title of the song? It was so confusing. And then I'm like, how does anyone keep all this together? And why is it this way? And so I'm like asking questions as if like I'm learning about an alien culture. And these kids take it as second nature. And so I'm immediately outcast. Like there's just too many things I'm doing that are so different that they can't, and I'm bullied. I am, either not invited to the birthday parties, or when I am invited, I'm the one who's ostracized. It's just like awful. And I'm not in the in crowd with anything. And I'm always looking for someone to be a partner. And anyone who happens to have to be my partner, it's like they're shunned by the rest of the class. It was like not great. And so
that honestly breaks my heart.
Yeah, I mean, it got so bad that I was able to tolerate it for a few months, and then it got to the point where I wouldn't leave the van, and my dad would have to like get out of the car and try and like drag me out, and like the physical nature of being like dragged out of a van is not great. Like that is awful. My dad felt really terrible about it, and so at the end of the year, we just decided we can't do that again. And so, we went to a much smaller private school at that point where people were pulled from different, not everyone had grown up together. And that was actually a much better environment for me to be able to acclimate.
I'm kind of curious, I had a similar experience in middle school where I was the outsider because my sister's developmentally disabled. So that made me different. But I'm kind of curious, after that experience, what do you think about school choice? I mean, do you think that's the answer, or is it to put the child in a different environment? I mean, I didn't mean to ask you a political question, and
No, it's interesting. I'll say a couple of things. When I reflect on the number of schools the schooling that I had when I was growing up, there was a tremendous change in frequency or I had a lot of different schools that I went to over my education. I think that the movement of those and being in very different groups of people with varying degrees of history within those groups helped me to really learn both like how to have empathy for the other folks in terms of my own experience in the public school. It also just helped me learn how to interact better and how to really not get too attached to any particular environment or structure, and to be far more free-flowing in terms of the environments that I'd be in, and to really find a way to enjoy the moments while I had them versus trying to hold on too tight. And so I think, that really helped me in terms of being more social than I otherwise might have been.
So you've hit on what I think is really the key to success, which is resilience. But I think resilience comes from resourcefulness. And a lot of times we talk about this narrative around resilience and resourcefulness, particularly for entrepreneurs. But a lot of times those stories start with really challenging childhoods and beginnings. And in your case, you had a very loving family.
Yeah.
You had a lot of support. You were a very close-knit family. And you had resources in your family. But you still had to learn how to be resilient. And that happened because you had to be resourceful in solving problems in each of your new environments.
Yeah.
So like you've like turned that whole narrative upside down about, you have to struggle in those early years financially. It's not just financial struggle. You had different kinds of struggles, but they also prepared you for success.
Yeah, and a lot of thoughts come from that. I mean, it's interesting. I look at these the popularity of Marvel movies, and so like all these superhero movies, and I think it's interesting that every single superhero has a very remarkable, often traumatic origin story.
The hero's journey.
The hero's journey, but it starts like the parents are almost always critical components of whatever they do. Like the Superman, right? The parents are blown up on Krypton. They send him off. Batman's murdered. The parents are murdered in front of him.
Thank you for telling me that. I didn't know that history.
I'm just sorry. I mean, like, yeah. Well, I mean,
I didn't know they were the origin stories for our superheroes, but I get it.
Yeah, I mean, like, and then you've got like, every single one of them has some traumatic thing, and I think that that is something that is deeply rooted in why people do the things that they do. They're either trying to get back at their parents for things their parents did to them or neglected them. They're either trying to make their parents proud. They're trying to return the love that their parents gave, which they could never do because there's no way to give back the life that was given to you, right, freely. And so I think it's notable, and that's why I think it's wise to ask people about their earlier days and upbringing, because it's in those moments that you can really start to understand where they got the motivation or the mindset to do things that might be different than everyone else in terms of those. But you're right. In my case, I had nothing but an extraordinarily loving family, a dream childhood. Yes, there's this like moment where I got bullied in school for a year, but like at the end of the day, I never worried about food, shelter, or anything like that. And so, at the time, it felt like that was, for me as a kid, I didn't know I was like very traumatized by that bullying. But when you zoom out, it doesn't look as bad, right?
But don't you think that prepared you to handle the challenges that came along when you wanted to build a company?
Yes, I thought, yeah, if I could get through that, there were many other things that, studying hard was nothing compared to living each day in this situation where no one wanted to be my partner in something or sit next to me at lunch or whatever else. Like that was awful.
The reason I'm so interested in it is that I get asked all the time. Like I've shared my personal story pretty openly, and it was really challenging. And in my case, it was a lack of family support. It was a lack of financial resources. It was a lack of education. And so that's a pretty standard story when you hear about someone becoming an entrepreneur and wanting to prove that they can do it. But I actually think that there's much more to that, in that when now that I've had all that success, and I was one of the lucky ones, right? I had a successful exit. Now my kids, I went on to become a parent, and I have kids, and my son went to prep school too. He went to Deerfield Academy. My daughter went to a wonderful boarding school, and they've lived a much different and what you would call a more privileged life. People ask me all the time, okay, you were successful because you had no other choice. Now you have these kids and you're raising them. How do you raise children to be successful when they have so much opportunity available to them? And I think this conversation has clarified that for me, which is it's not just about having an impossible origin story. It's also about the challenges that we face along the way in our own environment. And in your case, you faced challenges that very much made it important that you learn how to believe in yourself and trust yourself and ultimately make the best decision for yourself. And that built that resilience that you needed to be successful.
Yes. Let me add one other kind
You
of.
can challenge me on that, though.
I don't want to challenge it. I mean, all you said, all that makes sense. I do want to add that I agree with all of it. And then the other comment I want to make is it was in that moment in the whatever that tough chapter in bullying where I realized like, oh, life doesn't always have to be good. It's like not guaranteed. It's not, and it's like this, like my, like all of a sudden it became, I was deeply aware that like whatever I thought was like safe and comfortable and in perpetual might not actually be the case. And it might be because of variables I didn't know about yet or couldn't control. And what it did is it both gave me an empathy for people also going through tough times, even though they might not from an external perspective look like it was all that tough. It internally can feel very real and different. And so it just gave me empathy for that. But the other thing it did is help me to shift my perspective on how to interpret the privileged life I was living, and one that I then was able to choose to say, oh, this is not something I deserve. This is something that I should be grateful for. And like, who knows how long it lasts. And like that, to me, that shift of like, this is just how things are, or this is my right, or this is my birthright, whatever this is something I should be grateful for. And it's not necessarily like the natural state of things. That to me is that perspective is very important for like how one makes decisions in terms of how you see the reality that you're in or I was in. Yeah.
So I heard two key words there: empathy and gratitude, that came out of those challenging experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you get to empathy and gratitude instead of anger?
Yeah, that's a great point. Those are choices. Those are choices of I could have instead, bizarro Matt could have said, these kids are going to pay. I'm going to make them pay for making me feel bad, right? And so like that is certainly a reaction that I felt and could choose to like dwell on and live in or not. Because I don't know, my sense is like that's where like one's individual nature like comes out and or individual choices like manifest in terms of like choosing between the two, because both of those are very that the anger one is a very tempting pathway.
Mine was I'll show you.
Great.
Show you.
Yeah.
Like I'll prove that you were wrong about me. I'll prove that you should have believed in me or invested in me or trusted me or invited me to your birthday party.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, like choice. I mean, the choice of what one chooses to, what I choose to feel. I feel like, I have agency over that in terms of like, I can't necessarily choose the impulse, like those just come and go, but what I choose to hold on to and then choose to act on, those are within my power.
I love that. Agency. It comes back to agency.
Agency.
If only we could figure out how to make that available to everyone or make them believe that that was available to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that is something that I spend a great deal of time meditating and like, and thinking about in terms of like stepping outside of the hamster wheel that my brain will run on around different thoughts and just like taking a step and recognizing, hey, that is a hamster wheel. And we can choose to get on, or like we can choose to stay on that or get off it, or we can choose to stay on it for a while it's productive for the goals and then get off it. But like there's agency over where your mind goes. It's critically, that to me is like one of the most important things, one of the most critical parts, I think, to like success is that.
I completely agree with you on that.
In college, I was very countercultural, and so I like.
Is that crunchy? Is that what we would call granola?
Well, counterculture, and then I was in a business school at Georgetown, and many of my friends wanted to go into private equity and investment banking, and I wanted nothing to do with that. I didn't want to do the spreadsheets. I didn't care about money. I wanted to go live in the woods. I was like an outdoor ed, I was in the outdoor ed club leading trips backpacking. I liked nature. I felt that I wanted to run away from things like greed, and I didn't like comforts. I remember getting angry at my parents for buying pre-chopped vegetables because I felt like that was, I wouldn't want to get accustomed to someone else chopping I was very I just really pushed back against the things that I felt that everyone was saying I should like. Does that
So
make sense?
you,
No.
I'm gonna.
Well, I'll tell you.
I'm
but
like so fascinated by this because it's when you're not planning to do something is when you do something extraordinary, right?
Yeah.
So like your personality is just one of genuineness. Like you really want to be the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
And out of that grows building something extraordinary. I actually think
Yes,
that's
it is.
pretty cool.
It is wildly ironic that I went to an investment banking class. It was the only class I ever withdrew from. It was an investment banking class in school, and I walked in, and after 2 classes, I'm like, this is not for me.
So when you started college, did you start like with a general approach? Did you have a major? Because you went to the business school at Georgetown.
That
So
was-
how did you get
how
into
did I get to-
business?
Was
it an accident, or did
No,
you sign
that
up
was
for
a-
one of those classes?
It was something where we were looking at, and when you sign up at Georgetown, you can pick to go into like the pre-med school or the general college of liberal arts or the business school. And my dad was just very adamant that I really strongly consider the business school. And if I had a really good case to not do that, and I wanted to go into the medical school or just the college, I should make it. But I was so indifferent that I was like, whatever, whatever. I can't
And
wait.
he was in finance.
He was in finance.
So he wanted you to do that.
He felt that it was an applicable path.
You would be able to get a good job when you graduated from college.
Exactly.
But not knowing that you wanted to go off the grid and
Nobody knew that. Yeah. So they didn't know that I wanted to go off the grid. But yeah, they thought that, and I was neutral. I was neutral on everything, but I did not want to go into medicine because I knew that was a lot of memorization. It's very rigid, generally fairly rigid. I don't like rigid things. And so I got the idea that like, yeah, I don't want to have to live at home after. So, okay, I get it. We're aligned on me wanting to have a job that would pay something in some way.
So your primary goal was to be able to afford an apartment and...
I wouldn't say that. I would just say I wasn't thinking that far ahead, but I figured that I didn't want to perpetually be in school. So
so the goal wasn't to go to graduate school.
I didn't want to go to graduate school.
It was to be able to finish college and move
just
on with your
have
life.
the skills that I needed to be able to do whatever it is I wanted to do. And at the time, I didn't have a strong view on that. But so I go to this, there's prompting. I was neutral on it. Throughout school, I really enjoyed school. I liked all my classes. I was one class away. I double majored in management and finance. I was one class away from minoring in theology and one class away from minoring in psychology. Oh. I loved like philosophy. I loved all that stuff. And if I had had the ability to stay in college longer, I would have gotten those extra 2 classes. Not that it has any impact on much, but it was...
No, I think it's pretty amazing. So you were a good student.
I was a decent student, but I did a lot of extracurriculars. I started up nonprofit groups to go feed the homeless in the streets of Georgetown. I did the outdoor ed thing. I was part of Bible studies. I was doing all these. I had stuff every night of the week, and I loved people. I liked learning things. I liked getting into multiple disciplines and understanding it all. It was great, and so I had a great experience there. And then so when it was time to come to leave, I didn't want to leave. That was tough. It was I was in the van again, not wanting to get out. And then I was like, I don't really want to apply for any jobs. Like none of these are interesting to me. And my parents did not like that. And so my mom was like adamant that I at least for her sake.
Well, what was your plan if you weren't going to apply for a job?
I thought, I could live so cheaply. Like, well, let me tell you,
when I was feeding
the homeless week, I found out that Whole Foods would give, the dumpsters the night before, they would throw out in nice bags all of the food that was about to be expired, so it was still good.
It is amazing, isn't it?
It's amazing. And now I get it, the liability and all that, but so they do that. So I was like, well, I have access to a food source. I can live outside. I don't know. I just was like, I just rejected all of the things that I was being told that I had to want to do. I just don't like other people telling me what to do. So I didn't have a really well-baked plan, I will say.
I honestly, I literally love that because you're pushing back against what you're being told to do. And yes. I think that's such a core element of being a successful entrepreneur. You're willing to push back.
Yes,
you have to be willing to challenge the status quo.
I was willing, but remember, I didn't actually live in the woods because I agreed that my parents were generously financing my college education, and as I acknowledged that was a big deal, so I was like, okay,
There's some payback attached to that.
there's payback attached. What do you want? And so they're like, well, can you just go interview with literally anyone? It doesn't need to be. We have no requirements on what it is. Just go interview. And so
They didn't require you to get a job. They required you to interview.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're like, you can interview, get the offer, and turn it down. That's all we want. And I was like, okay, that sounds good. They're very good. They can be good salespeople. And so I I started interviewing at some of the banks, and this one smaller bank, I did this interview and learned that there was more to banking than just taking deposits, giving loans, and Excel spreadsheets in the back.
So wait a minute, you are like borderline ready to go off the grid, but your first interview is at literally the most straight-laced kind of job you can ever come up with on the planet, which is banking.
Mm-hmm. But then I learned about a job in banking that was primarily interacting with people, and I was stunned. And I was like, what are you telling me? You're saying that the job is to go out and meet with these company owners and figure out their financing needs and how to structure the best type of capital that they would need to grow their companies or handle some type of risk? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, but I wouldn't actually be the one crunching all the numbers per se. Like, no, but you would be like kind of in the middle of all of it. You'd have to understand all of it, but other people would do that. And I was like, that sounds awesome. And I was like, that sounds great. And it would be a way for me to use skill sets I've learned to get to learn about all these other companies. And I actually was really attracted to the idea of learning how money flows through our society. And like in a bank, you can see all of the flowing, like where it all goes, how it moves, and how people make more of it, how, all those kinds of things. And I thought that was very interesting.
Well, whether you're focused on having a lot of money or not, I think that's interesting. I mean, just understanding that process.
That's right. Yeah, it wasn't a finance, and I was like, ooh, my parents will be happy. I'll be wildly interested for a bit, like learning all this. And then it was at the time a much smaller bank that didn't have all of the spotlights on it, and so I was like, great, that sounds like a much better place. I like to go to things that people aren't, the value play, so to speak. And so before everyone else figures it out, I like to go there first.
So you weren't looking for the biggest company. You were looking for the place where you felt like you could, be
learn
yourself,
the most, be myself,
find your home.
Yeah. And so
make a difference.
Exactly. And I felt like the bank, this was PNC Bank, they had these great people that worked there. They had a focus on investing in the communities they were in. And I really liked the people. And I liked the bank itself, and the work that they had for me was exactly like a dream. I didn't think it existed, and I think that was part of my pushback to the world, because a lot of my friends were doing the things that I would have hated, which is the PowerPoint making, the Excel, like all that kind of stuff is just painful.
Well, I go and talk to college students all the time, and I like tell them my story and how I started and how I became a tech entrepreneur. And this is, I had to, I chose an alternative path. I went to smaller companies because in my case, I couldn't get the bigger companies to hire me. At the end, every single time, because I'm like, here's my email address. Let me know. Reach out if I can be helpful. I always get requests at the end saying, how do I get an internship at Apple or Microsoft or Google? And I'm like, you missed the point. Like, the whole point is that, first of all, you should find the place that's best for you. But secondly, if you go to a smaller company, in your case, a smaller bank, you can make a bigger difference. Like, you can have more impact, you have more opportunity, you can stand out in ways that are pretty significant. And actually, you did that while you were there.
That's right. Yeah, I ended up getting moved to, they placed me in DC, which is where I was, I'd gone to school there. I grew up right around there. And so it was a natural fit. And then they had bought a bank in Baltimore. And they asked for all the young folks, like, who would be interested in going to Baltimore, and not a single person raised their hand. And I could feel
such disrespect to the Baltimoreans.
Such disrespect, I know. And I also felt the knee jerk to not do it, because I'm like, no, I know everyone here. I know the city here.
Had you ever been to Baltimore?
I'd only been to Baltimore for an 8th grade aquarium field trip. That's standard, right? Which
everyone
is so crazy.
Comes for the aquarium.
Everyone comes for the aquarium. And I was like, I don't want to go there either. I don't know anyone. And so but I was like, but wait a minute, this is the fact that I feel this pull not to go, when I also logically know if they're buying a bank, they're likely going to turn over a lot of people. They also will likely have trouble getting young folks that I'm seeing right now. They're having trouble right now getting people to go to that location, which means that there will be a reshuffling of responsibilities and the people who do them. And so I figured if I go there, there's a much higher probability I get promoted faster, I get more opportunities to learn in a broader and bigger way than I otherwise would have in DC. And it was precisely because people didn't want to go there that that would happen.
I think you're hitting on one of the key lessons here. And I think it's really important for our listeners to understand that you raised your hand to do something that other people weren't willing to do.
And also, I was unsure I wanted to do as well. Yes.
So you took a risk.
Mm-hmm.
And you put yourself in a new environment that no one else was willing to sign up for. And that gave you more opportunity.
Way more.
That gave you a chance to really shine because you were here doing it. I mean, you were the leader of this part of the organization.
Well, I was younger at the time, but like as a result of being from the bank that was doing the acquiring, and as a result of being one of the few who was willing to go, that allowed me to stand out in many ways. And it was also a place where the legacy folks were trying to make sure I was happy because they didn't want to upset the mothership, and so there were many benefits that came from me doing that. However, when I first came to the city, I didn't know anyone. I did not like it. I had struggled so much. And I was held there because my hypothesis worked in terms of getting access to more responsibilities, getting to work on bigger deals, higher volume of deals, having the ability to walk into anyone in that institution's office, like all those kinds of things were mine. And so I'm like, well, that worked, but all the rest of my life was not as nearly as enjoyable as it could have been if I remained in DC, but that's okay. I felt it was like a sacrifice worth doing because I prized learning and increased responsibility above all else.
Do you think that experience when you were young, having to go into a new environment twice, first when you were really young, moving to Europe, and then moving back to the United States, do you think that prepared you in any way for this transition?
Certainly. All of the movement of schools, countries, interacting with all those different people, remembering what it was like to deal with adversity socially, all of that certainly made it easier for me to both have muscle memory and resilience because I knew I had done harder things.
That's great. I love it. So you closed some seriously big deals though while you were there. I mean,
did
you didn't just go do the job and get some exposure. You actually made a difference.
Yeah, I was able to bring over. Anyway, I'll say that I had a $400 million portfolio. One of those deals was
at 23, 4,
so I was 26 at the
26.
time. Yeah,
That's huge.
And then I a few years later was able to win something like the big Orioles deal. That was something that was one away from Bank of America after 20 years, never been done. So it was like made all of the front pages of the interweb inside of our 50,000 person bank. It was like a really cool thing. And at the time, the manager of my group had left, so there was like no one above. So then at that point, I got more exposure. It was good. But I would take on hard deals. I would try and find creative ways to add value to those customers. I thought it was really important to try and stand out in a way in a market that has a lot of competitors. And so, I would go and do everything I could to create value for those companies.
Right. So a part of your story that we really need to share with our listeners that's fascinating is that in your early 20s, I actually think that this experience prepared you to be successful as an entrepreneur. You took a huge risk. You moved to Baltimore. You're in like the most traditional of businesses out there, banking. It's as straight-laced as it gets and as conservative as you can find. And you go to work every day, do a great job. You've raised your hand and taken a huge risk starting a new position in a new city. But in your new city, you notice that there are a lot of homeless people. And in your free time, when you could be hanging out at the bars and, I don't know, on the bike trails, you decide to dress up like a homeless person and walk the streets of Baltimore looking for people to help. Now, I think for our listeners, that is like hard to wrap their head around, but I actually think it's consistent with who you are, which is someone who's willing to take a risk and someone who wants to make a difference in their community. And I know you've shared that, faith was a big part of your upbringing and your foundation. And so you had this desire to improve your community. How did you get from wanting to make a difference to actually taking that kind of risk and putting yourself out there?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I would say all of what you just said is very accurate. I think I was really just struck by the homeless that I saw, and I felt that I was in a new city. I had left college. Nobody knew who I was. I had a chance to make an identity. And so one of the great benefits is I didn't have to unmake an identity. I didn't have to like step out of a quote routine that like no one knew me. I was just kind of operating off grid, and in terms of like social
outside of the bank.
And so that was something that removed a number of barriers and friction points. And I also knew that I had the capacity to take on risk because I didn't have a family to take care of. I didn't have any large assets that I was maintaining. I was like very free. So like I would say that there were a number of factors that gave me a freedom that I sensed I may not have in the future. And so there was some urgency to this. But I also think like I was really struck with how grateful I was to have a job, an income, a place that I could go call home, the upbringing that I had, the education that I had. I was very cognizant of the fact that those are not things that I gave myself, right? Those came from those were provided. Yeah. And I've had this very, I just felt like to truly be grateful and express that gratitude, I would need to take an action, like to do something other than just think. Something. I just didn't want to do something more than just think I was grateful, And so like let's
write a check. I mean, you wanted to actually have an impact.
I mean, like I also wanted like human connection. I value human connection, and I think that when I'd walk by the homeless on the streets, one of the things that was very keep in mind, I was a psychology and theology almost minors on both of those, right? But I would see people stepping on the other side of the street from the homeless lying there. I would see people scoff or look away or whatever. And I would also see people also occasionally be rude. And
do you think they mean to be rude, or do they just not know what to do?
Some people are rude.
Oh, okay.
There are some people who are rude. But yeah, I agree with you. There are other people who don't know what to do. When I
walk past someone who's homeless, I won't give them money at this point. I've made a decision not to give them money. That doesn't mean I won't help them. Like I'll give them food.
I didn't mean that.
But like I have learned to have this face that says, "Don't ask me for money." So
right, yeah, no, I don't look. All the things that people do are very understandable to me. I do them too. Like I'm not having a full out conversation with every person who's homeless that I come across. There's not enough time in the day to do that. And
right. There was a time I tried though. I mean, like you want to make a difference.
You want to make a difference. And but I think, and I'm actually not bothered by that at all, because I'm like, people are busy. They've got things to do. And like, who's to say that spending time with a homeless person is more or less valuable than spending time with somebody who may not be experiencing homelessness at this time? Like, who's to say? Mm-hmm. And so
they are people with their own stories.
They're people with their own stories. And what I saw that was so concerning was I saw this society essentially reflecting back to the people who are experiencing homelessness as a communication that they are not worth it, valuable.
They're invisible.
They're invisible, or worse, they're undesirable. And like one of the two. So I'm not bothered by the fact that when people step on the other side of the road or ignore, or even sometimes maybe unconsciously rude, is not as huge of a concern. The biggest issue that I'd find with this experience was that the people experiencing homelessness would start to believe what everyone else was communicating passively or actively. And they were
worried that they were believing that.
They would believe it. And
or they did believe it.
They did believe it.
How did you know? How did you get to know the mindset of homeless people
in
your community?
I would go. I did spend several months going and hanging out with them in the homeless camps across the city and having a chance to talk with them. That was why I was dressing up in more tattered clothing, was because I didn't want them to look at me as someone who might be able to give them something as much as someone who is simply communing.
So you're a banker by day and you're hanging out in homeless communities at night.
Yes. Well, I needed to learn. I wanted to learn why this was happening, and I was very struck by it. I felt that our country was one of the most wealthy, powerful nations in all history, and I couldn't understand why this was a problem that we still had. And I had worked in soup kitchens and all those types of things before, but it wasn't quite enough. And so I wanted to go deeper and really understand like root cause. And it was there that it was critical that I understand the mentality of like how folks were experiencing life. And that's why I listen to I just hear like a complacency from folks, and that to me caused me to think that they would believe this. Like they didn't think they could leave the camps. They thought that the conversations I had were all around, I need resources, I need this, I need that in order to, and I'm not going to get those things, so I'm here.
So that was their mentality. Was that the reality, though? I mean,
I would say that, I mean, look, like, I would say that the need of resources is correct, but like the idea, the mentality that I saw that they had was that there's nothing I can do about it. And I think the reality is there's plenty that someone can do about it. I can understand like that and my concern with this is that I think that they were believing what people were communicating, and there are people who have legitimate like mental health concerns that I consider that a different category of folks who do need help and right away, and that is something that needs to be provided by society.
I mean, it's just so interesting that you had this just obviously profound need to want to make a difference. And I just think that's central to us being compassionate human beings. But it's like a leap to then actually put yourself out there in that way.
I would say that like all growing up, my parents made it a primary like communication. Like they made it absolutely crystal clear that I was always loved no matter what. And like every like nonstop, no matter how bad I messed up or whatever, like it was like that was always clear and always so regularly communicated. And it was when I was interacting with the homeless, I started to realize like, oh wow, and I could see that is not a given for everyone. And at the same time, I still believe like everyone is lovable and like worthy, and I think that like it's critical that people see that in themselves. And I feel like my parents were, by telling me that they loved me, they were helping me to see something that was already there, right? And so that's where I had a theory that maybe I could be louder than all the people on the street passing them by, telling them they're not worth it, telling them they're not valuable, telling them they're not beautiful, telling them they're not able to be loved. And if I could be loud enough and bright enough to reflect back to them like who they really are as priceless human beings, right? That might cause them to see it in themselves, and therefore like realize that they may be able to move their lives in a better direction to help pursue the things that would make them happy. And even simply just knowing that would be enough to just be happy. And I have like from the very like the day that I left college, there's these two questions. When I left college and I was like, I'm on my own. What am I going to do with my life? There are two questions that I'm trying to answer with all the things that I do. The first question is answering like, what is a human being worth? And like the second question is, where does that value come from?
Did you get the answer in this experience?
We had a great time. So we lived together for a year.
So actually, for our listeners, you actually went out not just to visit these homeless encampments. You were looking for someone to bring into your home and help them turn their life around.
To be fair, I did not. Yes, I was at the time I was living in a friend's spare room out in the county, and I was going to these camps to learn more about the folks who live there and to really look for people that I felt if I offer them a house and some kind of supports, that they may be able to change the trajectory of their lives.
Did they welcome you into their community?
Well, keep in mind, I was dressed in rag. I didn't quite share a lot about myself, and I was really just so in general, yes, but it wasn't very. They welcomed me in enough. I got to know the people, and it was when I then went out and got a house. And it was then that folks I had identified who would be ideal candidates, people who'd just been dealt a few bad cards, but they weren't having a serious health or mental illness issue. And so therefore I felt like they just needed to have a few good cards to get them back on the right path. And but I was shocked that after I
invited them into your home.
I invited them to my home, and I got rejected by the first folks that I had gone out to. So now I had a situation where I'm living in not a great part of town. I'm so scared to walk there. I keep all of my clothes in filing cabinets at the bank. I park my car at a light rail stop like 30 minutes away because I don't want to park it in the neighborhood. When I walk in the neighborhood, I'm wearing all these tattered clothes and I'm walking with a limp to look worthless. Like, that's how scared I am of this place. And for the first 2 months, I can't get anyone to live there with me. I'm offering the homeless a free house with no rent. And that's it.
And a lot of support.
And a lot of support.
And a lot of compassion.
I felt so embarrassed because I was like, I'm supposed to be in sales. Like, how could I not do this? And
this should be this should be a layup. Yeah, no.
A layup, yeah.
Yeah, but everybody's in their own experience.
Then I'm stuck because I've got this house now. I rented it from a cop, which wasn't the best plan. And
so you rented a house from a cop to bring in a homeless couple to live with you. Yes, the cop did not know that. Yes, right, of course.
And then so then I'm stuck where I had done months of diligence on some people that I thought would be good.
I'm assuming when you rented the house, you were dressed as the banker.
Yeah. I had the car too. Yeah. So then he was very surprised and delighted, you can imagine. But then when I went out, when I was rejected, I'm like, oh man, this is not good. Now I have to do the thing that's the most scary, most dangerous thing, which is to go out to corners and ask people at random who I didn't know that well, hadn't spent months like chatting with and hanging out with. And but I did it because I was like, I want to make this difference. I'm committed. I've got this house now. What am I doing in this house if I'm not doing this? And that was actually pretty traumatic. But I went out every day after work, put on the clothes, and I ended up finding this couple that had recently become homeless. They had only been homeless for a few months. They had been living with 2 kids out in a van, and eventually their kids were adopted by another family member, and they moved to a tent under the overpass near Raven Stadium. And then I found them kind of like looking for cigarette butts and coins on the median, and approached them, and they seemed to be interested, and they were open to coming to the house for a bit. So they gathered up all their stuff in a few trash bags, and we marched to the house, and that's where we ended up living then for almost a year.
I actually have a family member. One of my siblings is homeless today, as we speak, as we sit here. And that family member had a choice. Like the situation you created for the homeless couple where you provided a home for them for a year, he was provided a home for a year by another family member and given a year to get on his feet. Go get a job, save some money, move into a place of your own. And he chose not to work during that year. And now, a year later, he doesn't have a place to live because the deal was for a year, right? Mm-hmm. You've been given a year to make this transition. And, I asked this question of someone I know who is a very experienced therapist and has worked extensively with the homeless. I said, why do you think people stay homeless, become homeless and stay homeless? And of course, we know that some people fall on hard times.
Yep.
That's a fact. There is a safety net to try and help people who fall on hard times, and we should be compassionate when that happens. But there's also, of course, mental health issues. Mm-hmm. I have a sister who's developmentally disabled. Without a strong family support, I am responsible for her care. I don't know what would happen to her. And so as a society, I'm really happy that we have that safety net and that way to help people who need help. The next is, of course, drug addiction, alcoholism. And then the third, which I hadn't really considered, and she said, my friend who I approached about this suggested, is judgment. Not everyone has good judgment. And she said over and over again, she found with few exceptions that it was lack of good judgment that kept them homeless. Never thought about that. Now you could say that judgment goes back to drug addiction or alcoholism, but those are diseases that are hard to overcome if you're deep in them and they're rooted in some sort of longing or pain.
Yeah.
So how do you think after that year of having this formerly homeless couple living with you and really investing in that relationship, do you fundamentally think that people can change? And why did the relationship come to an end?
I do think people can change. The housing experience was only meant to be a year, meant to be a springboard in the first place. So it wasn't meant to be forever.
Wasn't going to be forever.
It wasn't going to be forever by design. It was actually only supposed to be 3 months per group of folks. And I extended it because I felt that there was progress being made. And I'm like, maybe the 3 months isn't enough. And
I love that optimism too, and that commitment.
I mean, I saw it. And so I was like, I could see progress. It was slower than I'd like, but it was happening. And anyway, so I would say that I did come to realize that I may not be equipped to handle all the different things. There was some drug addiction involved. There are other things that I just was not at 22 able to properly follow through on. Like I knew I couldn't be going to my day job and then also overseeing this as well. Like that was challenging. So
I mean, it's so inspiring though that you were willing to really invest in this way to make a difference. I mean, even if you've affected 1 or 2 people's lives, you've made a difference.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I'm just trying to reflect back the value to kind of, I'm trying to communicate those things. And whenever I'm doing stuff like that, it's extremely life-giving. And for, I think, anyone in the vicinity of it. And so, and especially for me too, in that as well. But I do think people can change. I think that, in the question of judgment, I could see many times, and it's common, right, where the judgment is to choose a short-term win over the long-term benefit. And when people have been let down so many times, it starts to become easier to understand why people would just go for the short-term certain win versus hoping, right, for the rest of the things. And so, but I think, change is interesting. Like the domain that I was trying to play on wasn't so much about the house or the job as much as it was how they saw themselves. Can someone realize who they are? In my mind is the question, and I think they can, and I think it's very critical around the people one surrounds oneself with, and what those feedback points are.
Yeah, I think so much of it is about how you see yourself. Who do you believe you are? And this particular family member I mentioned who's homeless, he has this image of himself from when he was a young child that has him as different than the rest of the family. Now, we don't see him that way, but he does based on, the circumstances of his environment at that time. And I'm not sure he ever got beyond that.
Yeah.
That became a stumbling block.
Yeah.
Right? That kept him from achieving his full potential. That's
where and I think if you remove that would be an amazing thing, right? To see how that can work. And it's interesting, when I was starting my company, this is so embarrassing, but one of the reasons that I decided I could do it, it may be possible that, how about this? I was a little much more hesitant about it, but I was one of the things that helped me understand that maybe I could do this wasn't that I suddenly thought so highly of myself. It was, I had seen the show Silicon Valley, which is a satire on startups.
I've seen it.
Yeah, and I saw these bumbling people going around and cobbling together their money.
I can do that.
And I just thought, is this what it's like? And then I just thought oh my gosh, if they can do it, I know it's a fiction, but it felt quite real. And I think in most things that seems scary. Like on the inside, it's mostly like a satire most of the time, and in my opinion, and on politics, business, all the things. And so I'm like, wow, I I just suddenly had more confidence in it like demystified, and it brought it down to a level where I'm like, oh, a normal human could do this. And
But don't you think that incredible risk that you took early on in your early 20s, like getting through that, not only getting through it, but I think you could define that as a success. Like it wasn't the optimal outcome, but it was a success.
Oh, certainly. I mean, remember, I was faced with
You lived
2
through
months
it,
of
first of all.
but I had 2 months of not being able to convince anyone. Remember, I could have had it. I was like, I could have an entire year where I could die in this neighborhood and people are going to find my body and be like, what was Matt doing here? Like, I didn't tell anyone I'd moved. So I'm
Your
like,
parents didn't know.
no one
any of
knew.
this.
So like, what was he doing in this large townhouse at the middle of nowhere? Like, it was like,
I
it
think
would
the
have been
fact that you
so
lived through it is
crazy.
extraordinary because like you don't know what people are doing. I mean, you didn't know if they were
that's
safe.
my plan was like, I'm going to appear worthless, ironically.
Until
right?
they move into your house, and then
right,
you're like,
yeah. And
where did they think you went every day?
they knew I went to work, but they
did.
thought I would like push papers around.
Oh.
So and I didn't have any clothes at the house. I had them all. I only had like some basic clothing, but like my phone, laptop, all my clothes. Like I slept on the floor on a Walmart blanket and had like one hanger of clothing.
So they thought you were in similar circumstances.
They thought I was better off than them, but not much. And
Got it.
they also, and we all shared a bathroom. Like we all were like really in there tight. I got them new beds, new stuff.
And you slept on the floor.
Yes, because I wanted to further reinforce the fact that I didn't have anything worth taking. And so I kept all this stuff in filing cabinets at work, which was its own awkward conflict.
So, and you go home with no phone and no way to communicate if there's a problem or
correct,
emergency.
because I had an iPhone. Couldn't have that at that time. That was a Lux item.
Thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So but I thought it was funny that it was kind of ironic that I was spending all my time trying to look worthless while also spending all my time trying to make these folks know and see their infinite value.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of fun.
I get it. That's amazing.
So, but I think, I mean, look, that experience, I was like, I'm going to, one of the first, 60 days of being unable to, while months of preparing for this, unable to convince homeless people to live in the house. Like that, it's hard to get to a deeper low, like psychologically, of like my own ability.
See, I'm thinking about it from the other side, which is the homeless person and the fact that while they are homeless and that it's not ideal for them, there's freedom for them in being homeless as opposed to moving in with you where there are going to be certain expectations.
Yeah.
Regardless of what those are, like
certainly
there's still expectations.
There's expectations. There's also like, what is happening? Why is this random person doing this? He's dressed like me. Like, how
Can
is
I trust him?
Can I trust him? Like all that. I get that. I would have been skeptical too. But I say all that because I was terrified living there. I did not want to live there except to do this. I couldn't do it for those 60 days. So I was just faced with abject failure that I could not explain to anyone. I am at that point still walking to work like in a limp, wearing all these ridiculous clothes.
Did you always walk with a limp? Did you ever forget to do that?
No, I would never forget. I was constantly afraid, so I would never forget to do that. That was my
the
safety blanket experience. So, and then I would, so I'm doing this. I feel like an idiot, and so when these people moved in, I was like, okay, like we got it,
success.
Yeah. So that was at least, and then it goes on from there. But it was really scary to move in there. That was a huge risk. It was horrifying but it was made better because I thought that the people at the camps were going to say yes. I hadn't asked them until I had moved in. Because I thought that night we're going to walk. Then when I realized they weren't and I had to walk back on my own that night, I was
Would be scary.
Terrified.
You built one of the hottest startups out there. And I do want to talk about that. And in fact, that's why I invited you onto the show, because I just think it's such an amazing story. You've created literally a new lane in banking. Mm-hmm. And, that's like the kind of startup. If you're going to like dream up a place to be, that's where you want to be. Yeah. And I'm pretty anxious to share that story. But it actually started much more modestly than that. And like all success stories, they're 20-year overnight successes, right?
Yeah, right.
So in the early days, how did you decide to get in? So this is a fintech company, just for our listeners. We want to share that, the company that you have built is in banking.
Yep. So after nearly 10 years in banking, I got recruited by a large private company in Baltimore that was much bigger than the type of company I'd worked with. I had previously been working with companies looking for, up to 100 million or so in loans. This company
That's a big number for most of our listeners.
That's a big number. That's a big number. Right. Fair enough. And the average size is probably 20 to 30, something like that.
What did you start with? Like, what was your starting number for what? $1 million, 500,000?
It was probably 5 million, something like that. If it was less than 5 million, we would wonder, it would probably go to a different group. And so, but this company had like billions of dollars of debt or of financing, and so
billions with a B.
With a B. And when I went over there, they recruited me, and I love the bank. I didn't want to leave, but they said, "Look, you have all this experience in debt management and corporate loans. We want you to help manage our $1 billion+ portfolio of that." And I said, "Well, I'll do it if you allow me to work on the IPO, because I know that you guys are doing that." And they said, "Great," because the same group of 3 people that I was on was doing that as well. So it was like, we have to have you do that. And that was a great experience for a number of reasons. It was actually a really hard IPO. We had to file 5 times over 2 years. We had like Bill Clinton as an example of why that had to happen so many times. We had Bill Clinton was an employee of the company. His wife was running for president during one of those times.
He was actually an employee.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And so like you'd have a situation where you couldn't take the company public because it would be a big thing for the presidential, and they pulled the deal so that we didn't do that. And so we'd have to rewrite it like 700-page S1 again.
Run for president, do an IPO, I don't know.
All the things, right? Yeah. And so but when I was there, that company was doing a great service in the education space. They became a public benefit corporation, which really is a designation for a company that allows the company to invest in its stakeholders, like its students or employees or its communities, in a way that may not actually be to the advantage of the investors. And as a result of being a public benefit corporation, the investors can't sue. In every other for-profit company, the investors can sue if you do something that might hurt you, even if it benefits your stakeholders.
Wow.
So that was, significant because the company was doing good work, and this was a way to further prove to the world, because you have to have a very rigorous third-party audit of the fact that you are doing a good benefit to society, et cetera. And so anyway, we made it a public benefit corporation and then took it public. But you can imagine, no one had ever done that before.
And how did you do that from a regulation perspective? Well, how does that actually happen?
There's like some regulatory, like legal designation where you essentially be like converting your corporation into a different type of corporation. But the issue is when you're taking a company public, and all of a sudden your company is free to not benefit the investors. That is now a big question of, well, can we get the price range that we want? Like, are investors going to look at that negatively? Are they going to be concerned that if I invest in you and you go off on some initiative to triple the salary of every teacher, that we're not going to be able to stop that? And all those other types of concerns, they may be silly concerns, but they are certainly unknowns. And that is something that made it very hard to also to be able to get that thing over the edge. But we eventually did, and took the company public, and then refinanced all the debt. And it was at that company this large company that I saw they had a lot of resources to have a small investment banking team that I sat on. They had access to the Bloomberg terminal for all the data on their peers and comps, and they had access to outside advisors, all to do 2 things. The first is to understand what their financing options were, and the second was to go execute on the ones that would benefit them. And I felt like that was a competitive advantage over their peers. And so it allowed them to grow to this huge company, to scale across 25 countries and all the things, and then, of course, become a huge success story in the area. And so I was thinking, while I was there, I was like, wow, wouldn't it be great if smaller and medium-sized businesses had access to these type of capabilities, this type of transparency, this type of data, but done in a way that you could use technology to bring the price down and scale it across the country. And I couldn't understand why it hadn't been done. I was like so confused. I didn't, I was so confused. It seemed like it would be a huge benefit. It seemed like it would be a great way to democratize access to capital. It seemed like it'd be a great way to remove inherent biases in how capital flows.
So for our listeners, help them understand, if you wanted to get a loan, let's just say you were a large company, which made it a lot easier because you had resources and assets, and you wanted to do a financing vehicle other than the stock market, how would you do that then?
Any company in the US that wants to get a loan over like $1 million, the only way to get that loan is you have to know somebody. You have to know
You can't
a
just
banker.
go to a bank and say, hey, I want, like your primary banking relationship. Wouldn't you just go there?
You could go there. You could go to your primary banking relationship, but for the secret, the truth is that most companies aren't qualified for a commercial bank loan. And yes, you could try and go there. Most people don't have relationships with their wherever they put their deposits. And if you go to a branch and you want a loan over $1 million, you're likely going to be kicked up to a different type of person who will then talk with you, ask for a bunch of information and questions, get all the information, and maybe come back to you and say yes or no. And if yes, maybe they can provide these types of terms. But
so it's arbitrary and it's people centered. Like you have to get to the right person.
You have to get to the right person, but more importantly, like it's highly likely that that right person is not going to be able to help you. Because again, most companies do not qualify for like the commercial bank loans that exist out there. And if you did, it's highly likely that a commercial bank is calling you every day trying to win that loan.
So they would be calling you if they really wanted to do it. So they're offering you money when you don't need money, but when you need money, it's hard to find the right person.
Yeah. And I would say that look, there are 5,000 commercial banks in the country. There's 3,000 non-bank lending institutions that lend to these types of businesses. There is no easy way to figure out. There's nowhere you can go online to figure out what pricing you can get, who's offering loans to your company, what the structure is, the size of loan. That does not exist at all. You have to show up at a bank and hope that somebody relevant might be able to talk to you. And if they do, they're going to spend hours getting information, asking you questions, trying to figure things out before they can even get to maybe we can do it or not.
So the interesting thing is that we usually have a primary banking relationship where we're depositing money, but that's the only banking relationship we have. And your model is to democratize the process so that if a company needs a loan to expand, they have access to all of the banking options out there and they can compare them to pick the best terms for their business.
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
Almost. Generally, if someone wants a loan, if a company in the US wants a loan, they come to our site and we can show them all the different types of loans that they qualify for and what the rates and terms are and how many lenders are looking to provide that type of company with that kind of loan.
Got it.
And at that point, if they like those pathways, they tell us they can select which ones they want to go after. And it could be for equipment, acquisitions, refinancing. It could be for things like, hey, I hate my personal guarantee on this loan. I need this off, and all that kind of stuff. And so whatever those reasons are, they select the pathways, and our system will pull on the top lenders in those categories to provide them with term sheets and go from there.
So how did you go from actually working in banking and then, of course, joining a private company where you help them do an IPO to starting your own company?
Well,
because that's a big jump and a huge risk.
Yeah, it's a big jump and huge risks. Yeah. I didn't have funding. I never raised funding before. I never signed my own customer for something I was doing directly before. I bought an entire pantry of chunky soup because I was like, I might live on soup for a year. That's a lot. That's hundreds of thousands of. It was a lot of soup.
So you wanted to make sure you had food.
Yeah, I was like, well, at least I have food and I can. And I rented out every room in my house, so I had no living costs. And
what is it with guys and chunky soup? I mean,
it's got a lot of protein.
It would not work for me.
I like it. Anyway, I'll say that philosophically, I couldn't answer the question why this didn't exist already. I felt it would be a great benefit because I saw that the way that companies access capital was all limited by their personal networks for the most part. And on top of that, there was an additional factor where I found that minority-owned businesses were even more restricted from accessing capital based on the fact that they're not necessarily in the same social circles. There might not be the same golf clubs. They're not at the squash lounge, like all that kind of stuff where a lot of that interconnectivity happens. And like it typically happens in an old boys club for this flow of capital.
So you had your banker, you had your lawyer, you had your accountant, and that was probably the network that you've known for years. You might have gone to school together.
Yeah, and they would refer you to their drinking and golf buddy, like, you know, drinking and golf buddies, and like, but none of it's being done based on the merits of the company and the specific underwriting criteria profile of that lending institution. Like it's being done based on familiarity of somebody does loans and they work at a bank.
So it wasn't democratic necessarily.
Not democratic, not efficient. It concerned, you know, issues, not fast.
Why didn't anyone like notice this before? Why wasn't there like this? Like, okay, well, maybe I don't want to go to this particular bank. Maybe I want to look at 10 different banks.
Or maybe I want to look at non-bank lending institutions to see what they're providing, who are not regulated and can be much more flexible. And I want to see like all this.
What would be an example of them? Like,
there are many. I'll say this. Most people can't name. Most people can name the top 5 commercial banks: Bank of America, J.P. Morgan. Right? They cannot name a single non-bank lender. And on top of that, even if they could name the top 5 non-bank lenders, whoever can do that, it probably doesn't matter because those are unlikely to be the top non-bank lenders for that company.
How can you be a non-bank lender? Don't you have to be regulated?
No, they are not regulated because they are getting private capital from wealthy investors or institutions. And so if they fail, it's not like somebody loses their personal savings deposits and they don't have to be bailed out, as an example. Whereas if Bank of America fails, that's lots of people's life savings. That's, you know, folks who aren't wealthy's like only capital, and that is a huge issue for the economy. But this is more like different sets of private capital that is more compartmentalized and therefore not needing to be regulated. And at the same time, the terms that they provide are actually they're in the same category of bank loans because they're competing for the banks for those companies. And what that ultimately results in is it is more expensive, but the loans are often bigger. They have fewer constraints. They have less collateral requirements. They're less likely to ask for personal guarantees. And the folks that use those often use it because they want to grow their companies faster. And even though there's a slight increase in the interest rate, it's better for them in creating the equity value. Or their commercial bank is too rigid and they need someone who's just going to be easier to work with on the covenants or the structure perspective.
So how many lenders do you work with?
Our system, we've got 2,200 institutions on it. Half of them are commercial banks. The other half are non-bank lending institutions. And that is a great market because that allows us to essentially show people options in any part of the country, in any type of loan situation that comes up, and we can make markets immediately overnight with that like network of folks.
So I recently went through this experience with one of my children who is in college, and this is the rule in my house. You have to pay for 50% of your college. Any scholarships you get go toward your 50% first. Right. So their dad pays 25%, I pay 25%, and you're on the hook for 50. But if you get a merit scholarship, for example, which each of my children have received, then that goes toward your 50%. I think
that seems like a very measured. That's a measured approach. I like it.
This is the thing, though. There's always a delta, right? So for one of my children, the amount is about $5,000 per term. Now, that child could work really hard and raise that $5,000, or they can take out a loan. So we didn't fill out there's like the FAFSA, the federal government form you have to fill out. So he went into the financial aid office and he filled out a form and said, I need a loan. So he got a private student loan. And I didn't know there was federal versus private student loans. They literally gave him a list of 100 banks that offer private student loans to college students. I was literally shocked to see this. I was like, how do you know which one to pick? What is the interest rate for each of them? What are the terms? Yeah. And by the way, just for the record, the terms were twice the federal loan. So the interest rate was double the federal loan rate, which really was shocking. And college students don't have a credit history, so none of them have great credit scores starting out, right?
Yeah.
So you're starting with low credit score, and by the way, you have these high interest rates, and you have to pick between 100 different banking offers. How do you possibly sift through all that? So I'm just wondering, is that similar to what you're doing? You're actually taking all of those banking options, but for companies, and saying, these are all the options available to you. This is the one with the best interest rate. These are the terms. And that way you can ultimately, using your technology and your AI-driven platform, identify the best fit for your company.
Yes. And I think that's a good way to think about it. We've gone out to all the individual lending institutions, and then also groups within those institutions look at credit and risk differently from one another. There are various nuances, and some of them are substantial nuances, but we have gone and captured all of that detail so that we can know with a high degree of confidence which lending institution is going to want to lend to that company and under what terms and what the loan will look like, and can calculate all that instantly. The amount of time it would take for a company to, if we gave someone every name on our lender Rolodex and we just said, Godspeed, go find your loan.
You just take the first one on the list.
The acceptance rate is extremely low. I mean, like most of them don't. Like we will go out. Sometimes people will go out and talk to. I'll tell you an example. We had one company go and they talked to 100 different financing partners, 100 different lending institutions. They got $0. They came to us and walked out in 90 days with $60 million. Now that is something where like it is very common that what works for a lender will not work for 1,000 other lenders. And so like that is, or what one lender may lend you $10 million on, or what 90 lenders will lend. If 90 lenders are willing to lend a company $10 million, we may find the company that, or the lender that's willing to lend $20 million. And like that might be the difference between whether they want to do a new financing or not. And
but some of those terms are static and some are not. Like the actual lending terms, are they static within that lender? Because the interest rate, I assume, moves up and down.
The interest rate moves up and down, but also like think of it as like the lender requirements are usually like a bigger box, or the lender policies are a bigger box than what they actually do. So we also see what they actually do versus what they say they do. And that informs how we decide which types of lenders go into what deal or not.
What does that mean? What would that look like?
Meaning that a lender may say, we will lend to companies that are, have $5 million of cash flow or more, or something like that. Or we'll lend to companies that have less than $3 million of cash flow. But when we put companies that might have $2 million of cash flow, they may just not do it. And so we can see who's rejecting what deals and when, and be able to direct people away from that. They could say, we do deals without personal guarantees, but we may find that they always require personal guarantees, even though they say they don't. And we may find others who say they do usually require personal guarantees, but because they were soft on loan growth, they may be waiving all that.
You're dumping all of this data into a technology platform that is generating results for the customer.
Yes, it would take, again, if they had the Rolodex of customers, it would take someone 2 years to figure out which of the lenders would actually do something for them and under what like terms. We can show them that information in seconds. And then if they actually like the results, they can hit a button and boom, within 48 hours, we'll be in market and they can actually start getting responses back from banks.
And you're using AI to do this?
We have AI patents. We are using both the software, the data, and the way we've set up our processes to be able to do this. AI is used in other factors for helping to figure out like what kind of matches we need and efficiencies and other types of improvements that we make on our process. But I would say the main lift is being done by the data that we have, the data we collect, how the system makes decisions, et cetera. The AI patent that we have is what allows our system to learn over time as its predictions are informed by what actually happens, and then it can like readjust. That's what the patent is for.
So how did you get started with this? Like I think this idea of creating a company, everyone sees the success you're having. You've been hugely successful building this. I mean, you've got the customer base, and for someone who wasn't driven by money, you've built a very financially successful company. Yeah. But it doesn't start that way. Like, what were the early days? Like, who was your first hire?
Look, I'll say, I will say that when we first started, I did not think. I mean, at this point, we've closed over $1 billion of loans. We have thousands of lenders on the network. We have like hundreds of millions of dollars of loans coming into us every month for options, et cetera. And I don't know if I would have believed if I had told myself 7 years ago that this would be the case, I don't know if I would have believed that.
In 7 years, you went from an idea. No, that's no time at all.
I mean, I don't know. I think I would say I'm perpetually in a state of it's going better than I expected, but not as well as I'd like.
You sound like an entrepreneur.
I suppose. But yeah, when I first started, it started with pulling on the string to figure out why. All the answers I got to why were all similar in that the lenders told me they would never go on a website. They would never trust a website to get leads. They would never trust a website to get information from a borrower. They would just never do it. That's not how it's done. They go to baseball games and networking events. Like, that's it. And
it's always a personal relationship.
Personal relationship.
And by the way, that's probably rooted in common sense because it's a trusted relationship. You're talking about the transfer of money.
That's
but that
right.
doesn't mean you can't automate the process.
Or it doesn't mean you can't enhance. Like, relationship is still a big part of how even on our platform, how the lenders and borrowers work together and develop trust with one another. But we enhance like the pool of folks that they'd even consider in the first place. And there's things that we do to make the logistics related to that process much faster and better. And so I'd like to think of it as we are enhancing those relationships versus removing them, which is a misconception. Some people think that it's getting rid of the relationship entirely, and I think this is the capital that is being provided is often being seen as coming from a partner. Like, that's people want partnerships. They don't want just one-off transactions, and so that's what we help enhance and help people get. As far as the early days, the banks wouldn't go on the platform. The borrowers would never trust a platform to upload their information. They all told me those are the reasons that this would never work. And I just noticed that not a single one of those reasons was a law of physics. Those were all behavioral. And I was like, okay. And then it's like,
that was your guiding light.
No law of physics.
No law of physics being broken. It's not being broken.
No law of physics there's no one's pointing to a law of physics to why this can't happen. That's when I was like, there's something maybe here. And then the other question is, well, why hasn't anyone solved it? And I realized that all the people who even knew it was a problem, all the eyeballs on it, were all being paid very well. The bankers are paid well.
So they had an incentive to keep the status quo.
There was no, and from their perspective, the problem is what they're getting paid to solve. And like, if they solved it, maybe I don't know. Like, they are all incented to keep it that way to a certain extent.
That's like a mind shifting concept, though. I mean, that is really where we're living in that right now with the introduction of AI. I mean, it's all shifting now from that institutional knowledge, that control over the process, to democratization and access.
Yeah, the AI shift is happening at such a pace. Like, I don't even know. Yeah, I mean, that is, it's just happening so fast that, like, I don't even think people have a chance to react as they did with my idea. They had plenty of time to sit back and say, well, I just don't think, people will trust it. You got to change the way we do things. That sounds hard. All those things. And yet, like, that's why, and I know as a banker, somebody who was a banker myself, I resonated with that being a very unusual way to do it. But it felt like there would be great efficiencies unlocked for the banking side in terms of deploying their capital. I could see that there would be immense differences in the terms that borrowers could get. I knew there were many borrowers, thousands of borrowers all over the country, that were being told no when they in fact could get a loan. Like, every one of our customers was told no, right? Like, they're told no, they can't get a loan as big as they want, as cheap as they want. They can't get a loan at all. And that's what we're being told by their depository bank or by some other lender. And that's when they go online and find us. And so
that's amazing.
That's where I'm like, there's a great inefficiency in a market that's an old boys club. It's not all that surprising. And so, especially in a market where thousands of banks all have a different view of underwriting. Man, that's just
the first thing that came into my mind is you get to say that because you're one of the boys. So, like, you were in that club, like, you were in the club, and you chose to, like,
dismantle it. Yeah. But I mean, I also think that goes back to my, like, if you talk about the upbringing or the past, like, remember when in college I wanted to go live in the woods.
I wanted to spend a minute before we let you go talking about how it went down when you got your first customer, because I know that you went to, you had gotten some folks interested in your deal, and they were like, yeah, but you don't have any customers. So how did you get your first customer?
So essentially, I was trying to raise money and get customers at the same time. And one of the people I was talking to raise money had suggested that I meet with his investment banker friend down in Northern Virginia. I went down there to essentially explain to him my idea, show him, the presentation, and the whole plan was he was going to then hopefully give a good report to this potential investor who might invest. And he loved the idea. He thought it would be a big deal if it came to market, and he said he'd wished that it was in market today. I asked why, and he said that he had a $60 million transaction that they were struggling to get bank interest. They went to all the banks. The banks all said no. They were struggling with it, and I said to him, like, well, good news. It is ready today. I can do this deal, and we should do this deal. Like, you should put this thing on the platform. With a straight face.
Knowing that it wasn't fully built out yet.
Well, the lenders had no way of logging in, and we had 0 lenders. So, yes, it was nowhere near ready. And he also knew that it was very early because I hadn't gotten funding yet. So he was like, what are you talking about? And I told him, like, look, my CTO and I, we've built it over the past 2 years, nights and weekends. We've got it working. It's going to be great. And, like, what do you have to lose? And he's like, you're right. I don't have much to lose. I might as well do. He's like, maybe we'll try it out. And so he shakes my hand and he walks out of the conference room, and I don't leave. And then he comes back. He's like, what are you doing? Like, isn't the meeting over? What's wrong? And
so you just sat there.
I just sat there and getting the nerve up to tell him that I wasn't leaving until we had a signed contract.
That's pretty bold.
But I mean, to me, yes, it was, he was like, what are you talking about? Just having a live user from a reputable investment bank use your platform to find someone is huge for you. You can get investors. I'm like, no, I need to see a signed contract with actual dollars in order for this to work. And it can be success. In that case, it was success only. But and
so he was saying, I'll take a look at it, but he wasn't willing to commit in writing. And you wanted that.
Yeah, he's like, maybe if it works, fine, but he doesn't want to put himself out financially, or why would he do that? This is a brand new platform. It's, I have no track record, and so he signed it, and I walked out and I called their CTO. I'm like, you're gonna have to take a couple weeks off because we need to build the other half of the platform immediately, and we've got this big deal coming. And I remember he was delighted, started working right away on building this lender login.
And he's working full-time in another job.
He is working full-time. I'm working full-time in other jobs. I had quit. I think I had quit at that time. But yeah, he's working full-time in another job. He wouldn't quit until we had the funding. And so, which made sense. He didn't have a pantry full of chunky soup. So
he was looking for a little more.
He's looking for a little more. So he goes out and builds it. I call a bunch of banks, all these banks who told me that they would never do something with an online black box. They would never get deals from this type of place. All of them agreed because the deal sounded so good. So they went into the thing, and I'll say this: the first night that the investment bank uploaded the materials, we discovered all the bugs. We didn't have like a quality assurance person, so I was on the floor in the fetal position listening to this very kind of dry investment banker telling me how there was a bug here, there was a login issue here, the thing wasn't loading. What does he do? This is like at 10 o'clock at night on our first big thing, and I've got the CTO like, you've got to fix this immediately. Like, what are we doing? And then there were bugs like for the next 3 days. It was I thought they were going to just not do it and just say.
That pressure, though, leads to an incredible outcome.
Yes. And I mean, like, it was so important that we have a signed contract, that they uploaded in the system, that the bank's going through the system, because I needed to show that people would actually use, like, it would actually create some kind of value. Well, it doesn't help when you've got all these bugs stopping that value from happening, So, but it did, ultimately they got it loaded up and we actually closed the deal. That deal closed. I got nowhere near the economics that we should have had, but it was a signed contract, and that's what I was able to go use to give investors comfort that there was a real business here and we could do it. People would sign, real deals could happen. It worked. There was adoption. You kind of checked every box you would normally need to check to feel like you could scale it up.
You created a whole new lane in financing for companies, and at the same time, you're trying to raise financing for your own company. And you did it.
Yeah.
It's an incredible story.
Yeah. I mean, that's, it was really hard. It was like a lot of things I'd never done before had to all happen successfully in order to even get to the place where we even had a chance.
I don't think anyone realizes how much risk goes into that and how difficult it is.
It's very hard.
And you redefined a sector, which I think is extraordinary.
Yeah, there's no one had really done it before. And to this day, there's no one who's able to compete at the scale that we are. And like, I know there are folks who are starting to try and replicate, but by the time they catch up to us, I've got a bunch of things on the slate that should completely change the game again.
The future's amazing.
Yeah. I'm a very big fan of the future.
Well, you've written a book about your experience trying to make a difference with the homeless community, from riches to rags.
Yes.
You laugh every time the book comes up, but it's an amazing story. And I want to share it with our listeners. And I'm hoping that the next book will be how to build a startup company and create your own lane. And redefine an industry.
The book probably will be how to be an entrepreneur and remain sane.
There you go. Is that a thing?
No, it's not a thing.
I don't know if that's a thing.
Yep.
It's been so much fun to have you here. I'm looking forward to seeing what's next for you. The journey's been amazing. You are extraordinary and I think incredibly inspiring. Not just because, the business story is inspiring on its own, but just also wanting to make a real difference in your community. So thank you. It's my honor to have you here.
It's my privilege to be here. Thank you so much. And those are very kind words. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And we ask every guest to sign the guest book.
Happy to do it.
Thank you for doing that. We really appreciate it. Let me turn it around here. Find an empty page anywhere. It goes for years. I know, isn't it great?
Oh my gosh.
You're going to want one of these, right? You should have one of these, actually, because you are living an amazing life. You can sign on this side, or you can start a new page back here.
Oh, my gosh. Wow.
There you go. How about start a new page? Any color. All right. That's good.
I got this.
Matthew Bjonerud, it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you so much. This has been a privilege.